All right, and good morning, everybody. How we doing today? How we doing, Cameron?
Man, I am fantastic. I'm pretty sure I beat Jocko this morning. I posted my time at 4:16 a.m.
And Steve Lowry says, "Good morning, other Steve."
Also, in the spirit of Jocko, I might have actually pushed things a little too hard this morning. I'm sore in the abdominal area, and I'm sore in the abdominal area not from the crunches, but from the push-ups.
Yes. Push-ups are good for the shoulders and biceps, even for the tris a bit, but correct. There is definitely a core component to the push-up.
Hey, buddy, for whatever reason, I can only... Oh, never mind. We're good. Keep going.
Okay. And I got Ma with us and Alex Bleepin' Jones. Good morning, brother. Good morning.
Hey, man. I wonder how we got that lucky. And the man with his... Only dude I know with a crazier sleep schedule than yours.
Indeed. And, you know, Alex is of the opinion that if we started doing a late show, we'd boost our numbers, and that might be a thing that we look at. We've talked about it a little bit, doing it periodically at any rate, and yeah, it's potentially upcoming. Anyway, so what day is it there, Cameron?
WTF CNN, and buddy, the media is the pile of trash that just... I'm sorry, I meant to say the gift that keeps on giving. While
Yes.
also being a giant pile of trash.
So, yeah, and yeah.
Hey, can we just skip straight to the question so that we can really put a button on what CNN has done terrible here? Because it made me so angry just in talking about it this morning, the whole thing with Kevin McCarthy and why would he oppose the commission? And so, do you want to set up the framing, or?
You know what? I'm gonna show him the CNN main page. Dad says brush fire mind without coffee. No, coffee. I'm having coffee.
I'm also drinking coffee.
Always coffee. Make no mistake. But I'm gonna go ahead and show him the CNN main page. And again, normally I archive articles from the enemy, but CNN they're struggling so hard. Their ratings are all the way in the toilet. The bad news is CNN struggled. CNN sheds chunk of primetime audience, but Chauvin murder trial coverage attracts total day demo. They're just struggling. They're dying over there. And Tim Pool's been talking about it. Oh, Dad says later show. No. I'll still be drinking coffee. If I'm live at midnight, Sergeant Major, I will be drinking coffee at midnight. That's maybe bourbon. We're cautious about drinking bourbon or scotch on the show, though. We had that one episode. It was got dark. Anyway, so CNN shedding ratings, just falling apart, and we look at the CNN main page today, and it's still orange man bad. The Donald has been living rent-free in their heads for a long time. And they're still going on and on about this crap, the January 6th protests. They're still calling it an insurrection. They're still calling it a riot. The same people who said it's not a riot, it's peaceful protests, fiery but mostly peaceful protests, etc., actively raised money to bail out the Black Lives Matter terrorists that protested and rioted. These same people keep using this insurrection and riot language to refer to the January 6th situation. Cam, you're killing me with the background noise, brother. Hit the mute, please. The thing that happened on January 6th was not a riot. It was not an insurrection. All right, for one, let's just talk about what an insurrection is. An insurrection is a protracted activity. It is not a single occurrence. An insurrection is like what you have in Afghanistan, where there is the nation, there is the force that's there, and there is a secondary force within the nation that is attempting to overthrow the country in a long, protracted activity. An insurrection. So, the closest equivalent we have in the United States to the occurrence of an insurrection is Black Lives Matter and Antifa doing things like
the Chaz.
Exactly. Setting up, and everybody remembers hearing about the Chaz. There were several of those. There were several autonomous zones. In fact, I didn't even think to look this up before. I'm going to see if I can find it real quick.
Yes. What are we looking at?
How many autonomous zones were there? Permanent autonomous zones. So there's at least one active currently. Wikipedia's got them all over the place. Anyway. There were several autonomous zones. The Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone is the one that everybody's most familiar with. There's currently one ongoing in Minneapolis, the George Floyd Square Autonomous Zone, and that's been ongoing, right? That. Steve mentioned Seattle, Portland, Minneapolis. They actually established an autonomous zone very briefly at the Wendy's in Atlanta after Rayshard Brooks committed suicide by cop. That's an insurrection, right? They're taking and holding land and not being dealt with, not being removed from that land.
Yeah, but what happened at the Capitol is not an insurrection. And so this commission that Kevin McCarthy voted against, I love the fact that CNN dedicates an entire article to asking the question why Kevin McCarthy would vote against it, and they can't hit on the right damn answer to save their life. Correct.
So CNN says the real reasons for why Kevin McCarthy is afraid of a January 6th commission. I don't know if afraid is the word I'd use. Days after a bipartisan agreement was reached in the House to form a commission to examine the roots and events of the January 6th riot demonstration. Look, if you can't use the word riot when people are burning down cities, then you can go piss up a rope with your riot language on this. U.S. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy announced Tuesday that he opposes the bill. Given the political misdirections, this is the quote from McCarthy, given the political misdirections that have marred this process, given the now duplicative and potentially counterproductive nature of this effort, and given the Speaker's short-sighted scope that does not examine interrelated forms of political violence in America, I cannot support this legislation, said McCarthy. Dad points out 12 Congress people voted against the commission. It's a
terrifyingly small
only
number. Only
12 people. That's a scary small number. So
Alex actually says in the comments there that the January 6th commission is an excellent chance to expose rhinos, and I'm going to have to disagree, and it kind of even ties into the thing with the CNN article. There's a really, really solid reason for voting against this commission, because it's not going to be a truth commission. That's not what it's going to be. It is going to be a propaganda commission, and the commission is going to come to the correct conclusion so that it can all go on the record. We already know who the rhinos are. We know Mitt Romney's a loser. I don't need another vote for that, and I realize Mitt Romney's in the Senate, not the Congress, but we already know Liz Cheney's a loser. The only reason you even have a seat in Congress is because your name is Cheney. and we don't need the commission. In fact, all it's going to do is keep the wound open, which is what the left wants. And it's not just what the left wants, it's what the swamp wants. So Kevin McCarthy being afraid, no, bullshit. It actually took a lot of courage to vote against this commission. So,
and just to bolster your point, we have this article from the Daily Wire: Biden to use private firms to surveil service members' social media accounts for concerning behavior. I'm going to share this article on Facebook after the show. I do recommend. In fact, I'll go ahead and share it right now. I do recommend reading this, and I'll share it to the Brushfire Mind page. So y'all definitely check this out on Facebook. You can, or go to the Daily Wire and check it out. But Biden to use private firms to surveil service members' social media accounts for concerning behavior. This report came out yesterday after our show. I'm not saying that that we had anything to do with it, but it's interesting. One of the things that we talked about on the show yesterday was I reminded you all that before the inauguration, when apparently we needed to deploy 20,000 National Guard troops to the U.S. Capitol to pull security for the inauguration, Biden had, I don't want to say a commission, but Biden had the troops screened for basically political views, and several soldiers, I mean dozens of soldiers, were removed from the mission because they had social media accounts where they voiced support for Donald Trump. Now, there's no evidence that any of them said anything that was actually like, I'm an avowed white supremacist, or I think we should kill a bunch of these and those people, or anything like that. No, nothing actually controversial. Just I'm a conservative. I voted for Donald Trump. I'm a Republican. I don't like that Joe Biden won the election, right? And I can say with relative confidence that none of them posted anything alarmingly partisan or super political, that they posted just general support for conservatism, Republicans, and President Trump. Because we all know that if it were otherwise, if one of them had, say,
even a single example, it'd be all
even
over
one example,
the news.
it'd be everywhere. And even without a single significant example, we're still seeing these articles all over the place about how the army, the military, is infected with white supremacy and extremism. But they say specifically that they're looking for right-wing extremism. When these people say right-wing extremism, they mean right of Mao. They mean that you may be pro-life, but you don't support post-birth abortions, right? If you're, I'm sorry, I've got a whisker in my mouth and I can't seem to shake it. Anyway, they mean if you're not on board for state-funded, no questions asked, partial and post-birth abortions, that's what they mean by right-wing extremist. They mean if you support voter ID, you're a right-wing extremist. That's what they're talking about.
And look, even if you're being hyperbolic in the moment, we're not that far away from the Overton window shifting to that point. One of the things that Alex said earlier in the chat is that he interviewed a guy who was there, and all he did was film, and Antifa kept calling his company to get him fired.
Yep.
And then we look at what happened with Crowder, who got his second hard strike for what? Like, he wasn't celebrating Makai's death. And then how about Molyneux just getting yeeted off every social media platform in existence? Same thing with Alex Jones. And there's a lot of stuff now. As time has gone by, I actually think Alex Jones may have been right about far more things than anybody wanted to give him credit for. But that didn't mean he deserved to get wiped off all these social media platforms.
One of the scariest facts that I have been forced to come to terms with is that Alex Jones is right more often than he's not. And the thing that makes him not quite look like the thing that makes it look like that's not the case is he tends to get the core of a story right and then over-exaggerate it.
That reminds me of somebody.
The chemical... If you're talking about me, I tend to shoot short of the mark. Obama turned out being worse than my most apocalyptic predictions, and Trump ended up being much better than my most optimistic expectations. So, but damn, you broke my train of thought.
It's terrifying to realize how often Alex Jones is right. He gets the core of the issue right, but then
Yes.
it goes so far in his verbiage that the actual message gets lost. Like, turning the frickin' frogs gay actually has some science behind it, because frogs can change sex spontaneously depending on environment and chemicals that they're exposed to.
And it happened in one narrow, limited case, but it did happen. And that's the thing that he was talking about. But he said it the way Alex Jones says things, and wow, we're off the topic now. Okay. So
no, we're not. We're not that far off. We're WTF, CNN.
You're right. You're right.
And the Truth Commission, because that's what this is, really. This is the Truth Commission codified. And remember, AOC even said that we should have a Truth Commission.
Yes.
And that's what this is. This is that exact terrifying 1984 style thing, just by any other name. And like we were discussing earlier in the week, how do they manipulate you? They manipulate you with emotion. Well, emotionally, all of us have strong feelings about what happened at the Capitol on January 6th. And that is the perfect environment to shove this thing down everybody's throats, so that guys like Chris and I, while he and I don't exactly agree on what happened there that day, the one thing we're in full agreement on is that was no insurrection. Duh, look up the definition of the word insurrection. Well, they can use that against guys like us. And the people that have already bought into the mainstream narrative that what happened there was an evil insurrection, well, we can just confirm their bias and make it a matter of public record. Like 100 years from now, when school children do a report on the early 2000s, this will be one of the things they can do a report on, about the time Donald Trump almost caused an insurrection to happen right here in the United States.
Yeah, and that, like, the idea that he called, let's give them the most charity we can on the interpretation of the event itself, and it's that charitable interpretation still does not include a reasonable assertion that Trump caused this to happen. That's ludicrous. And let me just remind you that after, let's see, this should be an older article. Yeah, February 6th. So this is 1 month after the demonstration at the Capitol. Secretary of Defense issues stand-down order to address extremism in the military. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin is taking on right-wing extremism in the military. Right-wing extremism. Okay, let's back up real quick to yesterday when Lieutenant Colonel Lohmeyer we read the article about Lohmeyer being fired over saying Marxism has infected the country, and what he was fired over is, they said, the official line is, for engaging in partisan political activity. In fact, they said for engaging in prohibited partisan political activity. Secretary of Defense Austin, by specifying right-wing extremism in the military, is engaged, in this case, in prohibited partisan political activity. Because what he's not going to do is remove La Raza members He's not going to remove BLM activists. He's not even going to attempt to identify any uniformed military personnel who might also be involved with Antifa. No. And this is February 6th, right?
Yeah, and even if we assume that everything that happened at the Capitol was as bad as the left-wing narrative about what happened at the Capitol, okay, that's our side one. That's their side. I mean, how many dozens? Like, if you riot for 3 days straight, does that count as one riot, or is that 3 separate riots because they have a tendency to take a nap in the brightest part of the day?
Or do you count the riots by location?
Right. I mean, so okay.
I mean, if you're burning
burning
Portland, San Francisco, and Atlanta, is that one riot or is that 3 separate riots? And if you burn Portland, San Francisco, and Atlanta for 3 days, as far as I'm concerned, that's 9 riots. That's 9 riots. And here's the thing: they're flying the BLM flag. They're committing crimes, flying the BLM flag, wearing the Antifa costume. And then Democrat politicians are raising money to bail them out of jail. There is only one correct answer. RICO.
I don't know, that guy that Crowder played on his show a couple of weeks ago that just straight up took a frying pan to the dome of a couple of Antifa members, I also think that's an acceptable solution to this problem.
Yeah, no, the correct answer is RICO. You charge every rioter and every Democrat that has raised money. Okay, it would be a stretch to charge every Democrat that has spoken in their support, but every Democrat that can be proved to have raised money to support the activity, and then you get to take all the rest of the Democrats because they're members of the same organization. So the DNC has raised money and supported BLM and Antifa. And that also goes back to the Vote Blue campaign, the big fundraiser for all of them, ties them all together. And what you have under RICO is one giant organized criminal conspiracy. And all the participants can be wrapped up in it and incarcerated under the RICO Act. That's what needs to happen.
Yeah, but that's...
Dad points out Austin was a general in the Army just 4 years ago. Why didn't he do anything while he was in position to do so as part of his job? Well, Dad, I'm going to say it's probably because he's a DNC puppet and likely has been for some time. And if 4 years ago,
there was a different commander-in-chief who would not have tolerated a clearly partisan and absolute bullshit activity.
Well, not only that, 4 years ago, if Austin had engaged in this kind of activity, Donald Trump might have said, you know what, that's a great idea. Let's find all the extremists and remove them from the military. Donald Trump would have said, all the extremists.
Right.
And so Austin probably had his marching orders from the DNC not to stir the kettle too much, make sure that they didn't start losing their inside men in the military. Because it is painfully clear. Our military, our schools, our government at every level have been infiltrated by criminals, by members of organized crime terrorist groups
that are sympathetic to Marxism. Let's be really clear about where their ideology comes from. They're justified in their criminal activities because it's all for the greater good.
And their objective is nothing short than the destruction of the United States, the end of capitalism, the death of the family, and the abolition of the Constitution. They're out there saying abolish the police, but what they're really saying is, one step at a time, destroy America.
Well, yeah, it's that slippery slope thing. The problem with so many of the logical fallacies, and
Yeah, when we went from let the gays get married to you're a bigot if you don't have your 5-year-old son dancing in drag on a stripper pole in New York City overnight, the slippery slope, the argument against the slippery slope is a fallacy, died a brutal death that day.
And that's the problem with a lot of logical fallacies is they're it's when they're misused. It's not that the slippery slope is not a real thing. It's not that the appeal to authority is not a real thing. It's how often people use them incorrectly or outright in bad faith.
Real quick, Dad says the USMC started banning racist symbols under Trump. I may need to look into that, Dad. I'm not saying you're wrong, but, and I'm not even arguing the point, but I'd like to take a look at how they define racist symbols. I bet you, I bet we'll find that symbols for groups like La Raza, BLM, Black Panthers, groups like that don't qualify under the ban. When they say they're banning racist symbols, it probably just means crosses and Confederate flags.
Yeah. So we're coming up on 8:00. So I'm going to try and help us out. Just put the button on it. And
yeah.
WTF CNN. Why is this article so important? And, why are we calling them out for this? Well, because the reason why McCarthy voted against it is not because he's afraid and not because one of the stipulations is that, he wants to be Speaker of the House. Well, okay, let's be completely cynical and say that the man is doing this for no reason other than his own personal political gain. Well, then this is still a pretty savvy move because you move up in power in politics by at least appearing to give your base what they voted for. And to refuse to allow a commission to go forward that is clearly just going to be an attack dog to punish the wrong thing, that's a savvy political move. And in even admitting that, you have to admit that what's going to happen is that this commission is going to sway in one direction, that the findings are predetermined. It's sort of like the golly, I can't believe I'm blanking on his name. The guy that investigated Donald Trump for like 2 years just to find out, whoops, I'm going to say that there was Russian interference, but I can't actually prove it. Mueller. Thank you. Yeah.
Mueller.
Robert Mueller.
It's Mueller time.
It's going to be Robert Mueller all over again. They've already got the determination in place. They just need something that they can point to so they can thread their narrative together. And that's why Kevin McCarthy voted against it.
And they didn't even really need something to point to thread their narrative together. What they needed was a convenient mechanism to launder taxpayer money into political allies' pockets. That's all the Mueller probe was about. They didn't give a shit about whether there were Russians involved or not. It was an excuse to take people that were loyal to the Democrat Party and launder money into their pockets. The DNC makes political contributions to groups like Planned Parenthood, and then Planned Parenthood lobbies the government via the DNC to get tax money sent to Planned Parenthood, and then Planned Parenthood takes that tax money and puts it right back into the DNC. They just needed an additional laundering mechanism where they could get money, where they could get tax money to come into the pockets of people who would donate that tax money back to the DNC.
Yeah, and
it's one giant money laundering campaign to steal U.S. tax money. Now I'm going to give you a little bit of push. Go ahead, and then I'm going to give you a little bit of pushback.
Well, I was just going to say, and Adam Bullshift got to put all that stuff on the record.
Yes.
100 years from now, whoever controls what history is, what the right and wrong history is, our great-grandchildren may well believe that everything that Adam Schiff said in those testimonies was 100% factual.
Yep, and you've just touched on a little bit of what I wasn't, not so much a correction, but everything you were saying about Kevin McCarthy and why it's a good idea for him to oppose this, it goes further than that. This is the only country in the world, I've said it 1,000 times before, America is not the last free place on earth. It's not like tyranny has grown up and surrounded us and we're fighting to hold it back before it takes over the whole planet. That's not what happened. America is the first foothold of liberty on the beachhead against human tyranny. This is the only country in the world that has the First Amendment, that has legally protected and recognized freedom of speech. And it's being eroded rapidly and painfully eroded. And you look at a place like Canada. In Canada, they have hate speech laws. We're starting to develop hate speech laws in this country, and it's disgusting. Hate speech laws are almost as offensive as any gun regulation. Because this is a perfect example. Austin stand down, Biden planning to use private firms to surveil soldiers and label them and determine their service status based on that label. In Canada, if the party in power gets voted out, then everything they say speaking in support of the opposition in Canada can be classified as hate speech, which means that the party in power is able to criminalize the criticism of the party. This is nothing short of that. This will mean that every time the partisan politic switches at the federal level, then the law changes what it's able to criminalize. Jordan Peterson is famous now not because he's a brilliant speaker, not because he's a brilliant psychiatrist, psychologist, not because he's a brilliant philosopher. All those things are true, but the thing that made him famous was standing up to Canada's C6, I think it was C16 was the name of the bill, a bill criminalizing misgendering trans persons. And his point, he never said, I will not use your preferred pronoun. He's Canadian. That makes him at least a little bit on the left. And he always maintained that he'd be perfectly happy to be cordial and polite in conversation with trans people and use their preferred pronoun and yada yada yada. But that if you make it a law, that I will be punished by criminal statutes, by fine, imprisonment, etc. He actually went so far to say, if you find me for not using prescribed language, I will not pay the fine. If you incarcerate me, I will go on a hunger strike. Right? The point is, you've gone beyond not being allowed to speak. You've gone to being commanded to speak. There's a big damn difference between getting fined for making your cute little pug do a Nazi salute and being forced at gunpoint to say that there are 5 lights and not 4. There's a big damn difference there. So pay attention, guys.
Super nerdy Star Trek reference.
Oh yeah, plus a super nerdy Meme War reference, all crammed into one. That's it's hard staying this plugged in, kids. Y'all be safe out there. We will see you tomorrow. Tomorrow, I don't think we're going to be doing a Total Win Thursday tomorrow unless something really big develops today. We've already started talking about what tomorrow's show is going to be. So I will see you tomorrow morning. Y'all be safe and yeah, take care.